In the course of time, modern man has taken a rather blasé attitude toward the universe of which he is so intimately a part. We look out around us upon the most extraordinary and miraculous of worlds, and yet we are scarcely astonished. Everything has gradually been deprived of its overtones. Children have much of wonder in them, but as we grow older, this wonder ceases, and a kind of glibness takes its place. We do not have the answers to most of the questions that we ask, yet we are not inclined to leave very much sentiment in ourselves toward this world and its wonders. We look upon the universe as a vast environment full of energies and elements, essences, substances. But then we have transformed the world in which we live into a kind of cosmic laboratory. The universe exists very largely to be explored and to be conquered. We imagine it going on indefinitely through the infinities of space. We have a feeling that it must have begun sometime and probably will end sometime. Or if it doesn't end, it will change continuously. Vast cosmic suns will burn out in space and new worlds will be born. And man will continue the careful analysis of spectrums and try to solve the mysteries of cosmic rays and energies around him. Actually, however, we have lost the sense of the sublime. There is probably nothing that we can ever turn our gaze upon so splendid as the sky of night. Yet to us, it is merely an interference with the routines and rhythms of the day. We simply have lost this innate romanticism that made life a wonderful experience when we felt more and did not know so much. The ancients, contemplating the universe, had a thrill from it all, which we can hardly understand, and which we are inclined to ridicule. To them, the universe was not just space and suns and moons and stars. The universe was a wonderland of living things. True, some of these things were beyond the ken of mortals. We could not see them. But our forefathers knew they were there just the same. And where vision left off, intuition took over. One of the earliest realizations of man searching to understand his world and himself was the kinship between the human estate and that of nature. Man, striving to understand himself, explored the universe, and striving to explore the universe, searched himself. There were certain parallels, certain analogies which struck in at an early time. One of the most interesting and positive concepts about this arose, of course, in India, one of the old lands where religions and philosophies and sciences were mingled together in a magnificent extravaganza of metaphysical insight. The universe, obviously, was the body of a great being. This body had its own kind of bones, and muscle, and flesh, and tissue. We could only see a certain part of that body, represented by planets and stars and luminaries. But we could also be aware of the great circulations going on within this fabric. We could sense an energy field enclosing all of these separate moving parts, tying them into an extraordinary functioning entity. And that this functioning entity was ensouled, our ancestors never doubted. That it was ensouled by a power capable of administering its infinite complexity, they were also satisfied. So to them the universe was a living wonder, not something inanimate. It was not only living in the sense of being a vibratory mass of energies, it was living as having a mind and a heart. And in wisdom, men sought to understand the mind of this vast structure. And in religion, they sought to understand its emotional moods. Men who go down to the sea in ships have learned to accept the ocean as a creature of moods, something more than merely a mass of water. The more we are acquainted with these various elements, the more we respect them, the more we sense something of the tremendous intelligence that is locked within them. Our forefathers also assumed the universe to be ensouled with intelligence, that every part of its plan, every part of its purpose was motivated by wisdom, by some kind of knowledge, whether it was rational or instinctive or intuitive, it was still there. This knowledge, this wisdom was purposed. All things were moving toward a destiny, towards an end or a goal that was known to something, or perhaps would be discovered by the very process of its own evolving motion. Also, our ancestors became acutely aware that nearly all physical things that we see around us, both in space and on our own planet, are actually the long shadows of laws. The universe is a vast network of regulations and rules, statutes and edicts, magnificent patterns by which all procedures are regulated. The universe is not actually a place of accidents or coincidences. It is a great, well-organized instrument, moving according to the laws of its kind, fulfilling its own purposes with an exactitude that transcends imagination. And as these laws operating throughout space cast their smaller shadows upon our own planet, we perceive that this planet also is controlled and directed by a legislative power coming from nature, coming from the heavens or from space itself. Actually, therefore, bodies are crystallizations along lines of law. The processes which are immutable create their own forms. And one of the first laws that man sensed in this magnificence was the law of continual and inevitable unfoldment. Everything is growing from some previous state to some future or subsequent state. The whole procedure is as though a vast flower was opening in space. Slowly, methodically, inevitably, this blossom spreads its petals. Everything is releasing something from within itself in the process of its own growth. Thus we see that unfoldment guards or guides the ways of things. And this unfoldment applies to suns and cosmic centers just as surely as it applies to the maturing and development of human life. Man is unfolding. Man is not standing still. He is not a complete creature. He must tomorrow be more than he is today, even as today he is more than he was yesterday. The only reason for existence is this process of perpetual growth. A man observing this growth in his own experience was not forced to be too imaginative if he recognized it also in space around him. The problem as to where law came from, of course, also intrigued our forefathers. Those systems of philosophy and religion which postulated a deity at the source of life usually assumed that these laws were an expression of the divine will. Deity could be a despot, imposing its purposes upon its creation with inevitable finality. Deity could think what it willed. It could decide what it wished, and by the mere fact of its own divinity could require its creation to abide by its pleasures or purposes or conclusions. This satisfied some early thinkers and satisfied Western man for a great many centuries. But there were certain inconsistencies in the concept. It seemed more reasonable to assume that in some way this world was not a despotism, that it was not ruled over by an arbitrary force. For if this force is truly arbitrary, then the thing that we are seeking most of all, the growth of things, would be frustrated. An absolute autocracy at the source of life would amount to predestination. It would end forever the free will of the creature. And if the creature is subject to the whims of an absolute autocracy, then moral responsibility is a fallacy. How can we be expected to be able to resist the edicts of an arbitrary deity? And how can we expect to develop character if we are constantly forced to follow certain procedures whether we will or not? Thus we have the problem that worried Job, the problem of man's freedom to be himself, and in this freedom finding the responsibility to be a better self each day. It therefore occurred to the more philosophic nations that the idea of a complete fatalism, ruled by an inevitable pattern of divine autocracy, with deity operating according to pleasure or displeasure, and not according to value, that this could not be held as a basis for an integrated universe. That it is not reasonable to assume that deity could be partial to some peoples and neglectful of others, or that God could be subject to hate or whims of jealousy, or could be responsible for any type of evil, even though it were only the hardening of Pharaoh's heart. So it became a pattern in the ancient mind to contemplate the possibility that law preceded deity. The deity did not create laws, but administered them, much as in the case of the leader of a constitutional government.